Hey guys, hope everybody's Pesach was awesome. In this video, I want to just explain very briefly the concept of Sefirot HaOmer and its relationship to the larger Sefirot concepts. If you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe, and you can also check us out at yesodblocks.com. We have a whole website there with lots and lots and lots of other extensive Torah content, so check it out. So the Sefirot are basically a structure of 10 different lenses or 10 different layers that you can think of as being this macro system in which there's basically the translation of the intangible sides of reality. You can call that Hashem, the Ein Sof. You can call that also your neshama. We're kind of like this microcosmic version of that macro structure. You want to translate yourself, your intangible self, the consciousness that you are out into the world. So you have these 10 layers that you use, which are called the 10 Sefirot. And so just like we have this microcosmic version in ourselves, all of reality also works with that. And there's this macrocosmic version that Hashem actually translates himself through these stages of 10 layers into the universe that you experience in all of its detail. And there's a lot of structure too that actually follows what's called a fractal geometric pattern, which if you want to look that up, you can Google that. Fractal geometry basically is where you have the big and the small are all mirroring each other. And so there's a lot to talk about just with that idea by itself. But Sefirot HaOmer specifically is basically supposed to be us trying to access awareness of these layers for a particular purpose. Let me just show you what I mean by that. So the concept of Pesach, you can think of Pesach as the Keter of all of Sefirot HaOmer. The Keter is the primary, it's the top point. That's the beginning point of all of the Sefirot. You can think of it as the initiation. It's the core principle that underlies all other things. So in a person, the Keter is like, what's your main driver? Every person has this core driver. We each want to become who it is that we sense that we are at the deepest levels of ourselves. That's your Keter. It's the ultimate impulse that drives everything else that you do. So with this larger structure of reality, what Pesach represents is the Keter from the purpose of existence's perspective. In other words, what's this whole place for? So you can think of it, if you actually watch my Pesach video, you already kind of know that the energy of Pesach is the idea of absolute, obsessive, and totally uncalculated love. It's that when you first start out in a romantic relationship, so you basically get really, really into the other person, and in that beginning phase, it's like this fire that erodes all boundaries and is all about just essentially chasing and being and wanting to be together, and you're always on the phone, you're always going out, you're up all night, you're constantly with each other. That initial phase is unbridled. There's no calculations. There's no, oh, I'm tired, oh, I'm hungry. It's just racing to be with each other. So that's the energy of Pesach, which is why there's no chametz. Chametz is about being passive, delaying, being at rest, essentially stagnant. And so we, in regular life, throughout a regular relationship, in the later phases, of course, there are times you have to be resting, you have to be passive, you have to be a little bit stagnant, because in order to actually be active, you have to sometimes rest and take a pause. But in the initial phase of a relationship, so that's the initial romantic explosion, then there is none of that. It's just, there's no chametz, there's just racing and running to be with each other. That's the energy of Pesach. And then the rest of the year, the rest of the relationship with us and Hashem is supposed to be having that as the backdrop. So you can think of Pesach as the Keter, because the underlying energy of any relationship, right? Think about a regular relationship. You start off with that obsession, and then it has to be concretized into some kind of practical lifestyle where there are times that you are together, times that you're at work, times that you're doing your regular things. So you have to basically build this structure around that Keter, around that initial energy that essentially propels the relationship forward. But what if you start to forget that initial energy? If you lose touch with the origin of it, so then you lose the obsessive side, you lose the love, then the structure becomes a burden. It becomes something that just gets in the way. And that's a general problem with relationships, when we forget the initial love. So then the structure that we built around that love starts to lose all of its meaning. So that structure is what the Sefirot HaOmer process is all about creating. In other words, just to take it back a step, Pesach could be thought of as the Keter. That is the large context. It is the impetus, the propelling of the relationship. It is the motivation, the core impulse that drives the connection between us and Hashem. What we're trying to do on Pesach is access our awareness of Hashem's obsessive love for us, and access our own obsessive love with Hashem and for Hashem. And then after that initial phase, which is the Keter, so you can think of that the energy of the Keter then bleeds down into what's called the Chachma and Bina, which essentially is the part of the mind that takes the initial impulse and begins to give it layering, begins to give it some kind of thought-based construction. So that's what Chachma and Bina essentially are, is trying to take that core idea and then think through, okay, what does that imply? And that's the beginning of the planning for the lower 7 Sefirot, which is the actual actualization of that theoretical construction of structure around the root impulse. So it's basically like, okay, we have that obsessive love. We start thinking, okay, what does that look like in real life? That's Chachma and Bina. And then we have 7 steps, 7 layers, which is the lower 7 Sefirot of Chesed and Gvura and Tiferet and Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut. And those 7 lower layers are supposed to be now taking the theoretical expression, actualization of the Keter and bring it to life in the real world. And so that's really what the 7 weeks of Sefirot HaOmer are all about. That's why it's a concept that, each of the weeks represents one of those lower Sefirot. The first week is the week of Chesed, the second week is the week of Gvura, and so on and so forth. And each of the days of the week also represent that. The first day of the first week is the day of Chesed of the week of Chesed, and then the first day of the second week is the day of Chesed of the week of Gvura. And so each of these 7 Sefirot are basically now being structured and actualized, or structuring and actualizing around the Keter Chachma Bina relationship that is generated during the time of Pesach. So that's really the whole point of Sefirot HaOmer. You're basically trying to take the energy of Pesach and then bring it into a structured, actualized form, and ultimately that culminates in the end point, which is Shavuot, and that's what happened on Shavuot, or at least what happened at the end of the 50 days, the 49 days of Sefirot HaOmer, was that now we were supposed to be able to now receive Hashem in His totality, and that's really the whole purpose of the ending. Again, what we're trying to do is we're now trying to make ourselves ready to fully commit to the relationship with Hashem. You can think of that like a marriage. That's exactly what marriage is. You're saying, first I was obsessed with you, then I built that into a plan and a structure, and now I'm ready with all those pieces. I have the love, the obsession, and I also have the structure. I can now actually reach out to create a committed context with you, and then take the next step forward to actually build that further. So that's the whole idea on a big picture scale of the Keter of Pesach and the Chachma and Bina that it leads to, and the 7 Sefirot underneath that, which are the Sefirot HaOmer. And we're going to do more videos explaining each of these different Sefirot, the Chesed and Gvura Tiferet, in the upcoming weeks. But that's basically the idea on a big picture of all of these things. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.